Welcome in, Loons fans, to another edition of the Matchday Preview. Jonathan Harrison here, joined once again by Manny Lagos. Manny, just us two today after, we've got plenty to discuss here. We've got the disappointing loss in Game 2 that sets up an incredible Game 3 coming up on Saturday. We've also got a ton of other news across Major League Soccer. Got some reports coming out on potential new head coaches. We've got other Game 2s across the East and West to wrap up. But I think, Manny, the place we should start is, by now, everybody knows, congratulations, Dane St. Clair, 2025 MLS Goalkeeper of the Year. Well-deserved, incredible season for him, and a well-deserved honor for him.
Yeah, I like it. I think before we go there, I think you also should have teed up the road weariness of the two of you and I.
Yes.
You did the red-eye Monday night. I did sleep in, but then flew back yesterday, but was in Colorado on Sunday. So we have our own road weariness starting today, which is a huge week for Minnesota soccer. But what a great way to start the show. Very well deserved. We've talked about his play for us. He talked about it for Canada. Super cool that we have the goalie of the year on our roster.
Yeah, absolutely. Second time the Loons have the goalkeeper of the year after Vito Manone won it in 2019, but Dane St. Clair, a big honor, one of the best, the best goalkeeper in the league this season, just proving it time in and time out, consistency for him. Before we jump into MLS playoffs, let's look back. We talked about this on the radio broadcast on Monday night. The Twosies, an incredible run for them, unfortunately comes to an end in Colorado. You said you were there. An incredible, as we said, a great run for them. Unfortunately comes to an end in a loss in the Western Conference Finals to Colorado, but you can't go without saying they had a great season, a remarkable season, a big step for the program, and looking forward to seeing what's in the future for these guys. Yeah, it was.
It was a really good game. I really enjoyed seeing our young guys fight and battle for the badge. You know, we started out and played a great first half, up 1-0. Second half, we just had a couple injuries, and you're playing away in altitude, and it's tough. And we still had our moments to tie it up after Colorado went up 2-1. They kind of scored two unanswered goals, but overall, some really good tactical stuff in that first 45 minutes that led to really dominating, and then obviously some great individual performances. And like I said, just a couple injuries, and then next thing you know, on the day, it's not quite there, not quite good enough, but great stuff. Gonna be very proud of how these young guys are developing. And again, it's not always about the winning at that level. Mm-hmm. It really is about the individual development, but sometimes those two cross-section in a cool way. And that certainly was the case in this run where they went on the road twice. They had two big wins. And it's these young guys going to these environments and competing is super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fun to see them grow and develop, and then put it all on the line in the playoffs and go on a big run. Something that, if I'm remembering correctly, a number 5 seed has never done in MLS Next Pro playoffs. So really cool to see them do that. Unfortunately, comes to an end Sunday night. But Manny, we've got playoffs in MLS to discuss. And let's start off with Game 2s elsewhere in the Eastern Conference. I will admit I didn't see much of the first batch of the games on Saturday because we were flying out on Saturday. So I'm going to have to rely on your knowledge and what you watched on Saturday. But Charlotte forces a Game 3, going to penalty kicks in New York City, 0-0 regulation, but winning 7-6 on penalties. Philadelphia, the only team in the Eastern Conference to win their series and move on to the next round after Nashville gets a 2-1 home win over Inter Miami. And then obviously Columbus Sunday 4-0 win over Cincinnati. So Eastern Conference sets up with 3 Game 3s coming up on Saturday and Sunday. Just incredibly tight playoffs there, as everyone would expect.
Yeah, I mean, all different kind of scenarios and storylines. I would say massive lost opportunity for NYCFC. Getting that road win and then now being at home to close the series out, and they couldn't find a goal. So credit to Charlotte, going to a tough, kind of unique place to play when you're playing at the baseball stadium. And it was a really impressive kind of resiliency by them to figure out a way to force a Game 3, given that they were kind of the favorite. Going into the Chicago one, it was a wild game. 2 of the 3 first half goals by Philly were just huge mistakes by the goalkeeper from Chicago, which is just an example of how tight and thin the margins are, not only for the collective, but for the individual. So if one guy's just off on the day and creates big mistakes, next thing you know, Chicago's out of the playoffs in a game that I think would have been more even than people were expecting a more of an even game, and maybe that going to a 3-game series. And then you go into the Nashville Miami, and I think it just exposed that Miami is still not quite as dominant as people expect them to be. They still are this unique force where they can play amazing, but if you get at them and you kind of expose their defensive kind of lapses, it sets up a massive game 3. The stress is going to be all on Miami. I think in a weird way, Nashville's won a trophy this year, and everybody was expecting them to lose in 2 games. They are playing with house money going to that game 3. So a huge game for Miami. And then you finish up with Columbus. Hell is real. It's great rivalry, great series. There's no doubt about it. And the red card helped. But
Yeah,
at the
the
end
red
of the
card
day,
changed things for sure, but
Columbus really showed up. Really, really put on a good performance.
so when you look at these game 3s coming up, who's your favorite? It feels like to me when I'm looking at them and how these series have played out. You look at the way Charlotte played in game 1, they were obviously missing Wilfred Zaha. He'll now be there for game 3 back at Charlotte. I feel like that one probably favors Charlotte just because of how good Charlotte
for sure.
are
Yeah.
at home.
And they had their one game where they kind of said, no, we can't play that way at home again.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one favors Charlotte. I don't know, honestly, about Nashville, Miami. With the way Miami played in that game 1, it felt like, as you said, Miami was going to run away with game 2 and just make this a 2-game series and be on to the next round. But Nashville struck back, they answered back, and that probably gives them a boost of confidence going back into Miami for game 3. So that one feels
I think
like
Miami has to be the favorite, but man, I'm telling you, there is going to be a lot of stress on the Miami roster and Mascherano. Again, given what the expectations of that team are, and what happened last year will be on their minds. Losing in the first round of these playoffs, which again
in 3 games.
Half the guys on those rosters are like, playoffs. What are playoffs? So, huge game coming up for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then hell is real going back to Cincinnati. That one should be interesting. Obviously, the red card in game 2 changed things, and we'll see how that impacts not having Yuya Kubo in the 3rd game. But I feel like that one Cincinnati favors Cincinnati as well, going back to their home spot in that one, considering how well they played in game 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're tabling our own kind of scenario here, but I think there's a similarity potentially that kind of got disrupted because we scored those 2 goals in the first half in Seattle, meaning that I still think Cincinnati's the favorite, but I think they took a big punch. I think they took a big punch where that game now is not about putting a thumb on Columbus eking out a win, and then game 3 is going to be a cruise control game. I think their ego got hurt losing 4-0 to your biggest rival in the playoffs. To me, it's obviously the goal difference in the end doesn't matter, but it does matter psychologically. Very similar to on the podcast today, talking about Monday, and we'd lost 4-0 to Seattle. I think I might have had a different approach to like how I think Saturday is going to go or what we're going to need to do. But I do think we come back now to say we can win game 3. There's no doubt in my mind because we didn't get throttled. We didn't play well, but we'll get to that game in a sec. But there's some similarities there. And I do think Cincinnati's got a little bit of a psychologically, a little bit of an ego hurt here going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So that brings us to the Western Conference. A handful of game 3s as well in the West, I believe. You have Portland, San Diego game 3, and then Minnesota, Seattle game 3. The other 2 games were finished up the other 2 series were finished up in game 2s after Vancouver gets a last-second goal in regulation to force penalties and then win on penalties in Dallas to win that series 2-0. And then LAFC just throttle Austin 4-1. That series never really got as close as people may have imagined it based off how those 2 teams played each other during the regular season, with Austin winning both of those games. But LAFC and Vancouver laying down markers for the rest of the Western Conference playoffs in their series wins and moving on to the Western Conference semifinals.
No doubt about it. 2 great teams playing really well. By the way, they have to play each other now. So what a great matchup. And, that'll be in Vancouver on turf. Vancouver's starting to get big crowds. That'll be a great semifinal match of 2 teams that are really seem to be playing with good form. So credit to both of them. Like I said, I do think Vancouver going to Dallas and getting the result is an example of what they've done all year. Every time they kind of seems like they have some injuries or they seem like they won't be a road team that's going to be successful, they figured out a way to win in 2. So and LAFC, the Son Bouanga situation is off the charts right now. It really is. So fun to watch those two. They're so dangerous. Just a lot to deal with. And they seem to be having fun while they're doing it right now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That is a dangerous combination, being good and having fun while doing it. That's those two together have just hit so quickly. That partnership has just fired off so quickly that you don't normally see guys come over in the middle of the summer and just play as well as him and Sung has done. But
Yeah,
he's
it's
been
interesting
incredible.
that you think about they really thought Giroux was going to be the piece that
Yeah.
kind of helped Wong, and it didn't at all. But Son and the kind of this speed and just the kind of tempo that those two play at, the rest of the league just can't keep up with. It's just so breathtaking fast and ruthless and clinical in the final third that MLS defenders have massively struggled to deal with two players.
It's funny how those guys quickly made all the questions that a lot of outside analysts had about how are you going to play the two guys who play the same position? And they've just like, doesn't matter. These guys,
Yeah.
just throw them on the field. They're going to play well. They're going to
I
just
think it
rip apart
matters. Don't get me
defenses.
wrong. I think you've got to manage both their egos, but also like, playing left and right and getting them excited to play. And I my gut says Baranga is probably a little more selfish. I think Son is a selfless player.
Yeah.
I think Bonga, there's probably some management that Steve Trundle is doing that is this isn't just a go throw them on the field and they're so good they'll create everything happen. I still think he has to put them in the right positions so they can, their best qualities can come out.
Yeah, tough game for each of those sides coming up in the semifinals. Vancouver hosting LAFC, 1-game series, one and you're done in that one. There's no 3-game series. There will be extra time if they can't figure out in regulation before the penalties. But yeah, looking forward to that series in a couple weeks' time. And that brings us to one of the games of the weekend. Portland 2, San Diego 2 goes to penalty kicks. This one I did get to see the end of after getting into Seattle, going out for dinner with Dan, and then coming back to the hotel. Got to watch the end of this one. And man, Portland were ripping apart that San Diego defense over the last half of that match. And we're just taking it to San Diego in front of the home crowd, going towards their supporter section, get an incredible late goal, a late headed goal into the back of the net to force penalty kicks. But Portland were super impressive on the night, coming back from a 2-1 deficit and just shredding a San Diego defense that's been pretty decent this season.
Yeah, a team that's been really good on the road has scored a lot of late goals. I think during the season that probably would have ended up 3-1 the way San Diego kind of saw games when they had a lead late. But credit to Portland. The game one, that second half as well, San Diego was on the ropes and it was tight. And Portland really pushed San Diego to the edge. This game too, I thought even better in that second half. They just got the energy of the crowd. They got the energy of the flow of their offense, and they were just creating chance after chance. And it was amazing that the last header of the regulation, great cross by Lassiter, great finish by a young kid coming on who just found the space, great timing, great header, and a really special moment for both the club and their fans, because those kind of playoff kind of ending goals like that don't come very often. So it's exciting. I think it's exciting if you're a Loons fan, because part of all of this is about hoping and dreaming of championships and pathways. Yeah. And there's no doubt now that this weekend, both game threes involve us massively. If we can get our result this weekend, Portland's got a chance to get a result. We can dream about maybe another home game later this month.
Hosting a Portland side that tends to set up really fun games between Minnesota and Portland. But if you have to go to San Diego, you've done it. You've done it once already this season in a massive 3-1 win late in the season for Minnesota United. So if you have to go to San Diego, well, so be it. That's a team and a place that you can play well in. But yeah, that one was a really fun one. And then you get to the penalty kicks. I don't think I've seen that many skied penalty kicks in a row in one session. That was incredible.
Yeah, 3 in a row. And I thought the San Diego goalie was their backup, came in and was doing a really good job disrupting the Portland's kind of flow of taking penalties. And so they got up early and you're like, oof, this will be San Diego's going to figure this out. And the next thing you know, they missed 3 straight penalties, 2 that went into the supporters section. I think the third one hit the crossbar. But it just shows you that the individual and collective kind of stress of the playoffs hits everybody. And it's hitting San Diego. Like that's why I mentioned, Portland does not have a lot of stress going into this game 3, and San Diego has a lot of stress, and they've never been in the playoffs before. that's the reality. This is their first time making a run in the playoffs, and the stress is hitting them pretty hard now that they've got to go to a game 3 back at home and find a result.
Finley's is a mission-driven pet brand redefining what it means to do business with purpose. Founded in 2016 by 2 former special education teachers, Finley's was created to address the staggering unemployment rate among individuals with disabilities, a community too often left out of the workforce. Every purchase of Finley's products supports real, paid job opportunities and community development for people with disabilities through the company's inclusive employment initiatives. From job coaching to community engagement, Finley's is creating a future where everyone has a seat at the table and a chance to thrive. Follow Finley's on Instagram at GetFinleys. Yeah, that one's going to be a really fun one to watch coming up this weekend. But that leads us into Minnesota United Seattle game 2 out in Seattle. And Manny, there's no way to put this, but that was a nightmare start for Minnesota United, going down 3-0 in the first 41 minutes, giving up a goal within 10 minutes, going down 2-0 within 21 minutes. But a nightmare start from Minnesota United that they found a way to claw their way back into in the latter moments of first half stoppage time. But that is when we had you on the pre-match show from Lumen Field, we talked about how you need to get a good start. You need to take it to Seattle. And that was the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, I mean, I let's start with a crazy positive, because there are negatives and there are positives too. But how crazy is this sport? I don't think anybody had in their bingo card 5 goals in the first half
between these two teams. Yeah,
these two teams who went 0-0 first leg. It was just wild. And I will say, I always remind myself of thinking oh, I know a lot about soccer. I know what's going to happen. You just never know where the games go. And so that on just a fan level, unbelievable. Back to the game, we knew Seattle was going to respond. They were the desperate team. And I just think there was a balance of how do we figure out to defend and then go forward and make them feel nervous about it, that we just didn't have in the first half. They got in the front foot and we couldn't respond with some chances of our own. And then the early goal just really opened it up, where now we were like, how much do we go for the game and try to get back into the first half versus the second half? And that's such a hard place to be in. And now Seattle is hungry and they're saying, oh, we've got 80 minutes to score a couple more goals and get this thing back to Minnesota. So long story short, it was just not a good start by us. You're right. I mean, we didn't start with the kind of discipline and hunger to defend in tight spaces. And I didn't think we started with the hunger to get forward and get some chances. So Seattle just wouldn't throw tons of numbers forward.
Yeah. And when we look back at that first half and how it played out, to me, it felt like, looking back, it felt like there was a lot of 50-50s that Seattle was winning that just we weren't getting to. There was a lot of, especially on the second goal, I believe it was Joaquin Parejo just waiting for the ball to come to him, and Christian Roldan just reading the moment, reading the body language of Joaquin Parejo and just getting on his horse, taking that ball away from a guy who wasn't expecting, and then bombing down the right-hand side. There was a lot of focus from Seattle going down the right-hand side, and we saw that in the latter moments of the first game, where after Seattle brought on Danny Musovski, they pushed Jordan Morris out to the right wing, and he was incredibly effective. And that was an area they clearly focused on in the opening moments of the first half. And it really played out well for them, as they were just on every 50-50. They were stringing together passes. They were doing things Minnesota were struggling to do for the first 45 minutes. And then stoppage time hits, and all of a sudden, we said it on the broadcast, a switch flip for Minnesota. Everything started, you started to see the Loons team that we saw in game 1 that was winning 50-50s, that was stringing passes together, that was getting takeaways in key moments, and that led to that first goal. Nectar Triantis, who we can talk about his exceptional play since he joined the club in a little bit, and I want to do that, but he gets a takeaway at midfield and then springs a counterattack after Seattle started pushing bodies forward. And it was an incredible goal to start off stoppage time and seemingly flip the switch for Minnesota.
Yeah, it was a wild situation. And going back to that first half for Seattle, I do think the 50-50s, the 60-40s, just full stop, that can't happen this weekend if we want to have the result we want to have. And again, I think I think this is a very much a wide open game about who could win this weekend. It's massively wide open and there for the taking. And first and foremost, you just said it, you got to win your 50-50s. You got to win your battles. You got to make it individually, collectively. You got to make sure that, Christian Roldan is one of those players that if you give him an inch, he will take all that inch and more. And
Yeah.
those 2 assists all came from him winning some battles on the second and third goal that allowed him to get the end line and cross. And that's just, we just got to make sure that doesn't happen this weekend. Because again, there's certain players that are really good at taking advantage of those situations. And then collectively it builds up. And it really hit us hard. Again, I don't want to criticize too much because the reality is when you're in that moment, which I've been there both as a player and a coach, it's hard to figure out how to get yourself and the group out of that mode and get back into it. And I do think it was such an amazing transformation because if you think about it, it was not a great offensive sequence. We kind of had a long ball to the far post, 50-50 came up, and Seattle looked like, you know what, I think we can get a fourth before the half.
Yeah.
And they started going forward, and Triantis just makes a great midfield kind of tackle. And now the numbers flipped right away. Ball went to Robin, great couple touches, really forward aggressive. And I just love both the pass by Robin and then the 2 great touches by Triantis before the finish, which was insanely clinical, just flipped the game on its head. Like right there is what you need and why you need to go forward sometimes to remind teams like Seattle, oh, no, you can't just throw 5, 6, 7 guys forward. We're going to hurt you if you do that. And we did. And that was kind of there the rest of the game, if I'm being honest. From that point on, Seattle was like, how do we play? And then 5 minutes later, not 5 minutes later, 2 minutes later, amazing winning the ball off of Yamar, amazing transition. Bongi actually great pass to Robin. Boom, 3-2, and game on. And we almost had the one right at the end of the half too. I mean, we had another counter. Joseph Rosales had the cutting with the left foot.
Admittedly, so did they. That pinged off the cross.
Right after that. But that was actually after ours.
Yeah.
Where we kind of had that momentum of like, let's try to tie this at half. Obviously the game has a different mode in the second half we can talk about in a second, but that first half was unbelievable because the way we got back into the game and the way we kind of energized ourselves, so impressive. I mean, again, it was, don't get me wrong, we didn't play well for large swaths of that first half at all, but it was super cool to see the resiliency of the guy, to bring ourselves back into that game and to see Seattle. I still say that benefits us for this weekend. Understanding that this is not a like, oh, one team's way better than the other team. These are 2 very evenly matched teams that we've gotten most of the better of most of the season so far this year.
Yeah. Before that Triantis goal went in the first minute of stoppage time, it felt like a very celebratory atmosphere, and rightfully so. They were up 3-0. They were taking it to the team that beat them in game 1 on penalties, and there was just a lot of confidence you could see from the Seattle players, just stringing passes, getting creative with their touches, and then all of a sudden that goal goes in, and all of a sudden, I don't want to say they had doubts, but there was a hesitancy and like caution about, okay, we can't make a mistake. Otherwise, Seattle or Minnesota is going to hit us on the counter, and they are deadly in transition. And the Loons showed that twice in a matter of a couple minutes in stoppage time and really flipped this game on its head going into halftime, where it felt like the halftime show for me was not going to be a fun 15 minutes trying to talk through what happened. But then you get those 2 goals, you change the mood going into the second half where you're now just down a goal and all of a sudden the momentum's in your favor and you're playing well. You bring over a little bit that stoppage time play and the confidence that you had and we're playing within stoppage time. Unfortunately, just couldn't find a way through to the back of the net in the second half, Manny.
Yeah, I mean, let's just, like I said, let's acknowledge it was a wild, unpredictable, crazy first half. The second half flipped again to kind of 2 measured teams trying to see if they could, figure out their chances. And I think I mentioned somebody at halftime. It was next goal wins essentially. And both teams kind of, I think, played differently in the second half, the first half, in terms of trying to keep it tight and trying to make sure that they're the team that scored the next goal. And I don't think it was our best second half, but I also thought we did some really good things. We limited their chances. We kept ourselves in it. We were, again, it didn't mean we have to win the game. A tie would have gone to their shootout. So there was just a 1-goal thing. But I looked at the opportunities in the second half were there for us because we didn't let Seattle score until late. And we had moments where it seemed like things were going to open up. At the end of the day, we weren't quite dangerous enough. And if we're being honest, our subs came on and gave us a little something, but just not enough. We didn't quite have enough to figure out how to break them down.
Yeah, and that felt like in the second half, it felt like a team in Minnesota that knew they had Seattle a little bit on the ropes. And as you said, next goal wins. If the Loons were able to find a goal and even it up and you can take that to penalty kicks, you have the advantage in the goalkeeper department there because as has been dissected or as was dissected in the week between the games, the goalkeepers and their abilities to stop penalties was vastly different between Dane St. Clair and Stefan Fry. So if you could have found a goal and got to penalties or even got a second one, you felt like you had the advantage going forward. And at a certain point in the second half later on, it felt like it switched where the Loons, they felt confident knowing that they just needed to score a goal and they were playing well. But then at a certain point, it flipped to, oh man, we're down a goal. We have to find a way. And a little desperation kicked in. They opened up at the back and Seattle were there to pounce and hammer them. And I guess when you're looking at the standouts and stories of the game, for me, it goes to Triantis from Minnesota on the Minnesota side. He was exceptional late in that first half, really a key in both of those goals going in. And he continues to shine since coming over in the summer and getting his first call up for the Greece national team. So congratulations to him. It's really well deserved because he has been exceptionally fun to watch. And our favorite thing on the radio broadcast is when Triantis goes on those runs. For a guy who's 6'3", who's as tall and lanky as he is, it doesn't feel like his ability to go on smooth runs when kind of weaving in and out of defensive swarms, it should be able to be that smooth. But man, he is really fun to watch when he gets on the roll.
Yeah, I think I would throw Triantis and Lode. Lode had a goal and assist as well, and the two of them, I wasn't just them, got us back in the game, but yeah, I thought they were outstanding. On the other side of it, I mentioned Roldan, and then we got to mention Vargas. The young kid had two goals on the day, and did he win the under-22 or was it Freeman?
Yeah. No, it was him.
It was him.
Freeman was the young player of the year. Obed Vargas was the number one under 22 player. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So some really good, quality from those two at Seattle. But Triantis has done an outstanding job. Like I said, both those tackles led to the counters in the middle of the field for us to score and get back into the game. It was a really good performance by both Robin and Triantis for sure. Again, I would say Saturday we need to look at some of the positives of the whole year against Seattle. B, even within the scope of that game, I don't think Seattle is coming in as confident as for example, Portland's going to San Diego. I think this game 3, and I know we're going to get to it. We'll get to it in a second. It is going to be so fascinating. I think you got two teams that in some senses are insanely confident. Right underneath that, I think you got two teams that still are uncertain about how they want to solve problems and figure out ways to win.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned some of the performances from Seattle. You can't go throughout this podcast breaking down that game and not mention the performances, as you said, of Obed Vargas. Jesus Ferreira had a good performance as well, a couple assists on the night. Two guys who didn't really show their best qualities in game 1 really stood out in game 2, were impactful. Obed Vargas scoring a couple of goals, Jesus Ferreira assisting on a pair. Jordan Morris was exceptional in his versatility, really helping kind of split open and pull apart the Loons defense. But Seattle, I think the note for them is they got the performances out of the star players that they needed, that they just didn't get in game 1 of the series. And how that sets up in game 3 is going to be very interesting, Manny. I don't know now game 3, third game in a row between these two teams, 5th time these guys have played each other this season. Does anything change, or do you expect more of basically what these teams are, knowing coming into this series that Minnesota likes to sit in defense and counter, and Seattle really likes to hold possession and really take it to the teams? At this point, does anything change? Is there any kind of late wrenches either coach can throw into this to change it in game 3?
Oh, I think there's so much. I wouldn't say that normally. I don't think that's the same for like the Columbus Cincinnati series. I think, both these coaches have made some tactical decisions in each of the games, and they've been impressive. They made subs decisions in each game. They're impressive. If we want to start with Seattle, let's talk about putting Ferreira as an offensive midfielder and how well he did. Yeah. Let's talk about moving Jordan Morris to the wing and then putting Musaski in and benching Rothrock. And that's my final piece before I go to Minnesota. Let's talk about how good Rothrock was off the bench. Mm-hmm. And so there was a management piece there that he benched him, but he kept him hungry to say, when you get in, I need that next level. And I think we can talk about our positive, our first game at home against Seattle and some of the tactical things we did with our 5-4-1, how we defended, but we got at them and we really created the expected goals were bet more for us in that first game. I think there's a reality that both these coaches have a lot of big decisions to make about who's going to play, where they're going to play, how we're going to use subs. Because again, I think in a good way, our staff is going to look at our subs were not very effective and dangerous in this game. They didn't have the impact that the Seattle's guys did. That's fine. It happens. But what's more important is we look at the things that were good on that game over the weekend, and then we say, you know what? We need to get more out of Kelvin. How can we figure that out? We need to get more out of Julian when he comes in. Like, how do we make sure as the game goes on, we're getting stronger by the end of the game? And again, not easy, easier said than done when you go down 3-0, by the way. You are mentally and physically exhausted trying to get back into the game, no doubt about it. But I think all of it is on when the margins are so thin, huge stress on the coaches to figure out what system, what players in lineup, and what's my sub rotation. It's going to be huge. Like, I think it's when it's this close of margins for these two teams. Unfortunately, a lot of this comes to the coaching and how they manage the game.
Who's the pressure on the most, do you feel? You give your answer, then I'll give mine. Going into this game, which team?
Oh, I think it's. I think you and I try to do a podcast that's honest and like. I think it's close to even, you know. And the reason why I say that is I think there's a national expectation that Seattle will be the favorite, but I don't think it'll be a surprise if one or the other team figures out a way to win, particularly because we have the home field advantage.
Yeah.
So I guess, what was the question again?
Which team has the most pressure on them in Game 3?
I mean, San Diego.
That's not an answer.
Well, it's an answer. It's the other game. I think it's even. I really do. I know that's an unfair answer, but I that's why I said if you ask me this, I wouldn't say that about every game, but I do think, you know, Seattle has their own expectations that they build a good internal expectation of doing well and winning. There'll be some national media that picks them. I think we have our own internal growth and goals and belief about how we can manage games, particularly at home. We love our crowd. We know our crowd. So I'm curious to hear what you say, because you clearly asked me that question with you know, you have one or the other.
I'm kind of with you. I'm kind of in the middle. I think it leans more towards Minnesota, to be honest with you, because we knew coming in, the expectation of this series was that it would go to Game 3 because both these two teams are set up well against each other. But the expectation, it felt like from the national media perspective, that despite it being a close series and going to Game 3, that Seattle was the likely team to win. And when you flip that on its head, you get the Game 1 win in the way you did at home, you start to change that narrative knowing how well this team plays on the road. And unfortunately, in the opening half of the game, it just didn't show up, and Seattle really took it to them. Now Minnesota, they found a way to bounce back, found a way to make that interesting in the latter moments of the game on Monday night. And now you go back home with the home field advantage, like you said. I think it slightly leans towards the pressure being on Minnesota. Seattle knowing that they've clawed this series back from very nearly collapsing and getting ousted from the playoffs in round 1. That's why I think for me that despite the expectations that Seattle will come out of this still from probably many in the national media, I still think with the way Minnesota played in the first game, with the way they found a way to make it very interesting in Game 2, I think the pressure might be on them to figure things out and get a Game 3 win, knowing how well they play defensively and can hassle and make things difficult for an opponent attack. I think there's a little bit more pressure on Minnesota going into Game 3.
Good. I like the answer. I have a great expectation of these guys bouncing back. They've done it all year. They've showed such resiliency with adversity, particularly after a loss. So I'm excited. I'm in a home playoff game, real fall weather in Minnesota this weekend, by the way. We are talking mid-30s and maybe a little bit of snow. So
bring out the orange ball, Manny. My favorite. Bring out the orange ball.
I don't know if it's get that much snow, but either way, like you said, it's a fascinating series because we talked about how even these two teams are, and it's going to the third game. Even Seattle wanting to stretch out, saying, "Oh, in the away game, that first half, we fought back, saying, no, these are two really even teams." So I'm looking forward to it. It's gonna be awesome. Big week of training, big week of preparation. But there's no doubt I think our group can walk off the field winning this game in the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at the Minnesota perspective of this game coming up and some of the questions facing them, the biggest question is where do you find or how do you find a goal? Because we know Seattle, they have the goal scoring threats with Morris, with Roldan, with Rothrock when he's on, with Musovski, who showed his ability to find some space in the box. Minnesota arguably don't necessarily have that one guy that you would pinpoint as the goal dangerous threat. Yeboah just hasn't been in form for the last half of the season. It's been a bit of a struggle through injuries and whatnot for him to get back into form. Bangukle Langwane playing out of position up top as the lone striker, had some good moments, had a great assist on the Robin Lod goal. Where do goals come from for Minnesota? Who's has to be that threat for Minnesota on Saturday? Or is it important? Are you okay with a scoreless regulation going into trying to force penalties?
I mean, my answer would be I don't think the goal comes from individual brilliance. I think it comes from collective, balanced soccer for the day. I think we've got to be the better team on the day to score the goals, which means that we've got to be great defensively, organized, structured, and limiting space in the right moments where we both win balls. But I think differently than even the game one, we need a more balanced second half like we had in the first half of game one, in that we've got to be able to go forward and create waves of attacks. And then I can tell you the goals can come from a lot of different people. It can come from set pieces. It can come from, just dirtiness in the box. Like I can have five guys that can step up and score at that point. So I think before I get to like who individually is going to score the goals, I think it comes down to us being hungry to being really good on both sides of the ball. And sometimes we get caught where we're only going to be good on the defensive side of the ball. I don't think we can afford to do that. I don't think we can afford to defend at home for a good 80 minutes and then ask you to have one guy make a moment of brilliance. I think we're going to have to figure out a way to really have a system and lineup that allows us to defend the way we do it when we're good, like we've done all year, but then be hungry to figure out waves of attack and moments in the game where now it's not about a guy, it's about 4 or 5 guys stepping up and figuring out who wants to score a couple goals for the group on the day.
All right. Your predictions for the Western Conference game 3s. Minnesota, Seattle, San Diego, Portland. Your predictions.
I mean, it's Minnesota versus Portland. That's the easy one. So that's not, I mean,
is that the one that you want, or is that the one that you're predicting?
That's always how I do it, though. You know that. I don't go any other way. If there's a pathway, there's a pathway. So
that's fair. I like it. I like that.
On the flip side, I will pick. I can change it because we'll have a couple more shows before Vancouver and LAFC. But my early morning, I've got Vancouver maybe eking that one out.
Yeah. The only disappointing thing out of what happened this weekend is that it sets it up that, if and when the Loons do get to the Western Conference Finals, it has to be on the road because you're below in the seedings, below Vancouver and LAFC. So it's disappointing that the teams that they were playing couldn't find a way to make it interesting going into make game 3s out of it. But that sets up for a tough road trip in the Western Conference Final. That's a ways down the road here. But yeah, there's a possibility that the Loons find a way to host the semifinals of the Western Conference semifinals against Portland. And I want that to happen. So I'm going to will that. I'm going to speak it into existence, and Portland's going to get the win. Minnesota are going to get the win this Saturday. Manny, I'm looking forward to this one. This one's going to be so fun. There's going to be such a great atmosphere, middle of the day at Allianz Field. Bring everybody out, buy as many tickets as you can, because this is going to be an exceptional show.
Push. I agree. We got to push and get it. The weather is going to be a factor. The fans are going to be a factor. I love this playoff soccer. You got to believe. Like, I just would bottle up that 5 minutes where it was 3-0 and the energy and the team were just like, this could go to 6. And next thing you know, we had it. We were right in there, and it was right back in that. And I think this weekend, with everything on the line, one of the more historic clubs in MLS, great rivalry club for us. Love it. You cannot have a better sports weekend for Minnesota United than being at home to advance to the Western Conference semifinals. It's amazing. Love it.
Yeah. You've played well all season. You've gotten home field advantage in the first round.
You deserve it for
Yeah.
a reason. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to this one. 2:30 p.m. pre-match show with Dan Terra and myself. Manny Lagos will join us for a segment or two during that on 1500 ESPN, 1500ESPN.com. Looking forward to that, having you join us there. Also, you can listen to us on MLS Season Pass. You just got to click the audio options, go to home radio feed. Since we are the home team, we'll have that for you as well. But 3:12 kickoff. Looking forward to this one. Saturday at Allianz Field. Manny, the playoffs, game threes are here. You can never really go wrong with a game three, and I'm looking forward to the intensity and the drama kicking off. Game three Friday night. We've got Friday night soccer as well. Charlotte, New York City kicking off the game threes, and then it goes all the way through to Sunday night, San Diego, Portland. So looking forward to this. Hopefully we can watch that San Diego, Portland one and be looking at the team that we'll be playing next instead of looking at what could have been. So looking forward to this, and this should be a really fun one Saturday afternoon at Allianz Field. Manny, good stuff from you today.
Appreciate you too. Let's go.
Looking forward to it. Thanks to the production staff, Grace Dearson, Kyle Hayward, Evan Entler for putting this on every week. Loons fans, we'll talk to you next week.